Whilst these days we're used to the World War I era standard US battleships, their uniformity of armament, armour, etc. at the time was far from a given. The Nevadas started a new trend, but the Pennsylvanias had upped the number of main battery guns by 2, and now, in 1913, it was time to consider designs for Battleship 1915, the follow-ons to the Pennsylvanias. There had already been some debate for the previous class as to if the 14-inch should have been abandoned for 8 or 10-gun designs carrying 15-inch. And now, with 15-inch guns confirmed on upcoming British battleships and intelligence indicating that all the other major naval powers were also moving to this standard, the General Board of the US Navy proposed Battleship 1915 should be improved, armed with 16-inch main battery guns, 6 inches for the secondaries for improved anti-destroyer work, thicker armour of some description, and no less than 8 underwater torpedo tubes. There would also be an anti-aircraft battery, the first time that such a thing was purposely designed for a US capital ship. Proposals flew thick and fast, the largest being an almost 40,000-ton design armed with 10 16-inch guns, a 16-inch thick belt, and no less than 21 inches of armour on the turret faces. The smallest offering, Design 4, was a mere 31,000-ton 8-gunner and used the Pennsylvania class's protection as the standard. But so eager was the US Navy to get the 16-inch into service, they also had a couple of other budget options available for the notoriously penny-pinching Secretary of the Navy, which included a pair of 6-gun designs that used the saved weight to up-armour the ship, with one design even proposing to fit 19 inches of belt armour on 35,500 tons. The Secretary of the Navy, Josephus Daniels, rejected all the designs, although Design 4 was in some ways the ancestor of the later Colorado class, with the twin justifications of cost and that the expected battle range was close enough that the 16-inch and the 14-inch would both have good enough penetration against opposing capital ships, and having more guns meant more chances of hitting. The General Board tried again and again to get some kind of 16-inch ship through, but by 1914 the Secretary of the Navy had had enough and ordered Battleship 1915 was to be a repeat of the Pennsylvanias, except with the allowance of having the guns able to elevate independently of each other, thus making them 3-gun as opposed to triple turrets if you want to get really technical. Attention now turned to the hull. The ram-style bow of the Pennsylvanias was discarded in favour of a clipper-type bow, largely to prevent excessive water coming over the main deck in heavy seas. The secondary battery was also relocated entirely out of the hull and into the superstructure, although this change came so late in the process, actually whilst the ships were under construction and fitting out, that the first 2 ships had already been completed with hull-mounted casement guns as well as the superstructure-mounted guns, and then these were rapidly removed, ensuring that all the ships would spend the bulk of their service lives with the telltale plated-over casements fore and aft on the hull. Whilst the 14-inch gun was specified, the General Board managed to incorporate a new 14-inch 50 caliber design as opposed to the 14-inch 45 caliber found on earlier ships, and they also introduced the turbo-electric drive system to the US battleship fleet. The resulting vessel displaced 32,000 tons normal and had an armament of 12 14-inch guns in 4 3-gun turrets, although most people just call them triples, a pair super-firing forward and a similar pair aft. After the removal of the casement guns in the hull, there were 14 single 5-inch 51 caliber secondary guns in the superstructure, 4 single 3-inch anti-aircraft guns, and a reduced torpedo battery, only 2 fixed underwater tubes, 1 per side. Speed was 21 knots, courtesy of 32,000 shaft horsepower, driving 4 screws, and the armour layout was now the US standard, 13.5-inch thick main belt on the all-or-nothing principle, 18 inches on the turret faces, and an armoured deck of varying thickness, with the single greatest thickness of plate being 4.5 inches. Originally to be named the California class, the lead ship's name was altered to New Mexico while she was under construction, and the unexpected windfall from the sale of 2 pre-dreadnoughts to Greece funded an additional ship, so the class would have a total of 3, New Mexico, Mississippi, and Idaho. Laid down across 1915, they would launch in the first half of 1917 and commissioned from the end of 1917 for Mississippi through to spring 1919 for the Idaho. This made the first 2 ships the most modern US Navy capital ships active during World War I. although immediately after the end of the conflict they were all assigned to the Pacific. Here they would remain, Mississippi being the first ship to sink another with 14-inch guns when she sent the pre-dreadnought USS Iowa to the bottom during a fleet problem exercise, the latter having been turned into a remote-control target ship. The vessels would only return to the Atlantic, the place of their birth, in 1940 as part of neutrality patrols and as convoy escorts. Thus, they missed the attack on Pearl Harbor, but in the aftermath of that attack they were quickly recalled to the Pacific, where they would patrol the west coast to reassure the populace that the Japanese weren't about to invade the continental United States. Their more proactive participation started in late spring 1943, but they were largely restricted to shore bombardment thanks to relatively minimal upgrades as compared to the ships that would be recovered from Pearl Harbor, which were heavily modernized. As new fast battleships and the Pearl Harbor refits came online, the New Mexicos could finally get their own somewhat more extensive overhauls starting in early 1944, ending the war with radically different anti-aircraft suites. New Mexico, having had some casemate guns removed in favour of 20mm and 40mm guns and a handful of 5-inch 25 caliber anti-aircraft only weapons, Mississippi had a more extensive 5-inch 25 caliber battery, and Idaho having had the most extensive changes, with all previous 5-inch guns replaced with a number of 5-inch 38 caliber mounts. Post-war, New Mexico and Idaho were quickly decommissioned and sold for scrap in 1946 and 47, but Mississippi was kept around as a gunnery training ship, with a huge variety of guns fitted in place of her old battery, everything from a Worcester-class Type 6-inch twin turret to 5-inch 38 caliber guns to the new 5-inch 54 caliber gun, as well as automatic 3-inch 50 caliber mountings and more still besides. She would retain a single 14-inch turret, the aftmost one, until 1952, when it was removed to allow her to test missile systems. But with that done, she would also be sent to the breakers in 1956.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.